It's really an honor for me to be back in Connecticut with you here today, so thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be representing the President's Hurricane Sandy Task Force. I grew up in Mystic and Willimantic, and my father is a proud graduate of the Yale class of 1941. So thank you for having me here, and thank you, Senator Murphy, for the invitation. We're coming together at an important moment. For a long time, the scientific community has told the world that the climate is changing, posing an incredible threat to us all. In recent years, we've seen that the predictions have become reality. The 12 hottest years on record have been in the last 15. It feels like the storms that used to occur every 100 years seem to come every few years, or in the recent case of Oklahoma City, within 10 days of each other. I had a meeting with Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey a few weeks ago, and he said, I don't know why they call it the 100-year storm. Since I've been in office, there have been 3 of them, and I'm not 300 years old. If nothing is done, as we've discussed already, the risks facing the region and the country will only continue to grow. So that while we know that we have to cut carbon pollution by moving to clean energy sources and cutting our waste, we also know that we need to act now to prepare ourselves for the effects of the climate that we're not going to be able to mitigate against. As everyone here in Connecticut realizes, and throughout the entire New England region know all too well, they're not theoretical future threats. These are the impacts already being felt because of climate change. While working on disaster recovery at HUD over the past 13 years, I've seen up close just how devastating the weather-related disasters can be in places like New Orleans and Tuscaloosa and Cedar Rapids and New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Pennsylvania, Delaware. Hurricane Sandy's fury caused so much destruction throughout the region, damaging or destroying well over 600,000 homes, causing unprecedented loss of power in the region. The size and scope of the damage done by Sandy was unlike anything many of us in this region had ever seen before. And it was clear in Washington that extraordinary support for the region was going to be required. That's why the President created the Hurricane Sandy Task Force, chaired by Secretary Donovan of HUD, to bring cabinet-level focus on the work. It wasn't just going to be a FEMA question of getting in and providing some relief dollars, but really rallying the entire cabinet. A divided Congress ultimately passed a supplemental appropriation bill of more than $50 billion, thanks to your delegation's tireless work. We're very grateful that we had the opportunity to work with you, so thanks again, Senator. Once the task force was established, we quickly got to work. Our goals were to cut red tape to get the assistance where it was needed and effectively, and ultimately to outline principles to guide the investment of federal dollars. Since we knew that there would be tens of billions of dollars in supplemental assistance flowing through the region, we wanted to ensure that the rebuilding would be done right. While certainly rebuilding is a locally driven process to protect our communities and our investment in them, we knew that it was really going to be critical to engage and incentivize communities to rebuild differently, in a more resilient manner. Putting back what was lost is usually the drive after a storm. There's a rush to put back exactly what was lost. We see it on the Jersey Shore in terms of nostalgia. We just want to get there and put it back. But really, the better approach is to take a moment and pause and think about how we can come back smarter and stronger than before. In order to do that, we need to ensure that science is the foundation of our work. We need to ensure that local decision makers have the data that they need to make scientifically sound decisions. It sounds like an obvious common sense first step, but it's not one that the federal government has led with in recovery from previous disasters. There are certainly those who ignore science and deny climate change, but when it comes to building stronger in communities, it's the research that matters. It's the facts that matter. It's the science. So that's why our task force partnered with the best scientists across the federal government to empower local governments, businesses, and citizens with the information that they need. In too many communities, the standards for flood risk had not been updated in years or even decades, and very few of them incorporate future risks, like sea level rise, into how they look at those risks. As one CEO who lost critical facilities during Hurricane Sandy said, just tell me how high to rebuild. There's no clear answer, though. There has not been a clear answer from the federal government between confusion on FEMA maps and just a lack of understanding about sea level rise. So we set out to answer the question of how high do we rebuild, and ultimately issued a rebuilding strategy to the president last month with 69 recommendations, which span across the fields of housing, small business assistance, infrastructure investment, data sharing, and flood insurance affordability. What makes our report stand out to other disaster reports is that it's not just some ideas to sit on a shelf, but rather 69 recommendations that already have identified owners across the federal government and philanthropy and private enterprise. One of the things that we're most proud of is that through the work of the task force and NOAA, we developed a sea level rise tool, perhaps one that will be useful to Yale going forward as you look at your own tool, to allow local planners and decision makers to click on a map based on address and see a projection for sea level rise as far as a century into the future. We hope that with that knowledge in hand, communities will take the measures necessary to protect themselves from the future floods. It's a Sandy region-specific tool, but the President's Climate Action Plan came out and called for a similar tool nationwide. Perhaps that's something we'll be able to partner with Yale on going forward. Another initiative of the task force that we're particularly excited about is the Rebuild by Design competition. We are using a design competition with philanthropic dollars from the Rockefeller Foundation and others to attract innovative design solutions and ultimately build or implement resilience projects in communities in the Sandy impacted region. We invited teams of experts to come in and judge them based on not their design ideas, but the quality of their teams. So we have experts in engineering, hydrology, landscape architecture, many other fields who came in and responded to our request for qualifications. We received 148 applications and selected 10 teams. They're working now in Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, around the region to try and partner with think tanks and universities and really figure out what are the needs, how can we comprehensively address them with the goal that they will ultimately tie into the billions of dollars in federal assistance so that when the rebuilding happens, we'll be using the best science and making the best decisions. As I close, I just want to stress that the work of the President's task force isn't about looking backwards. It's about looking forward to the next storm, but it's also about a fundamental shift in the way that communities think about all the rebuilding that we do. All the building and all the planning should be incorporating the risk that we face because of climate change. We have learned through disaster recovery analysis that for every dollar we spend on mitigation, we can see a $4 return when the next storm hits. So there's a lot of economic sense for investing in mitigation on the front end. It's critical that we protect our businesses so that we can compete and continue operating after a storm. So I'd just like to say thank you again for all of your work. It's exciting to hear all the work that's going on, and I know that working together, we can ready our communities.